Hi, everyone. Thanks a million for joining us. I hope you can hear us okay. We're just going to give it a minute or two before we kick off. We've got a really exciting lineup plan for you. Last week we chatted all about BER, and tonight we're going to be talking about where to start when upgrading your home. So that's namely the fabric first approach. So joining me this evening, I have two fantastic guests. I have Saoirse Fitzgerald. She's going to be telling us all about renovating her 200-year-old lighthouse in County Cork. Many of you will know Saoirse from Home of the Year 2020 and from her very envy-inducing Instagram, The Lighthouse Keeps Her. I'm also joined by my very knowledgeable colleague, Susan Andrews, who will be here to answer all your questions about insulating your home and how to improve the comfort and energy efficiency of your home. So this evening is all about answering your questions and helping you on your journey to a more energy efficient and comfortable home. So please feel free to ask us absolutely anything, well, within reason, and we'll do our very best to answer you. So if you, so just comment throughout, and so we'll do our very, very, very best to answer any questions you have. I know we had lots of questions last week, and I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions for Susan and Saoirse. I can see there's lots of people still joining, so I'm just going to give it another minute or two. Just to let you know as well, this is week 2 of our 4-part webinar series. So you can actually, if you missed last week, you can listen back from our YouTube as well, and I'll send around a link to everyone who's joined as well. So thanks, Saoirse and Susan, for joining us this evening. I hope we're not keeping you out of the sunshine for too long anyway. Yeah, perfect. Right, I'm just going to get going. So, and again, as I said, just leave your comments for everyone below and we'll answer them at the end. And if anything relevant comes up throughout, we'll answer as we go along as well. So Susan, I'm going to go to you first. So as I said last week, we spoke about getting a BER. So once that's done, you've got your BER, you know what rating you are. Where should people start when looking to improve their energy efficiency of their home?
Yep. Well, thanks, Louise, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening. Yes, it's such a sunny evening. It's strange to be talking about insulation, but definitely important, and you'll be thankful for it come winter. So as you said, the fabric first approach, well, it's all about insulation. So if you're considering improving the energy efficiency in your home, and you've done your BER, really insulation is your starting point. So what we would always say is your attic insulation is really number one. I mean, an uninsulated attic, you're losing about 30% of your really valuable heat through that space. And it's probably one of the most inexpensive energy upgrades you can undertake, but you're actually going to get huge benefits in terms of comfort. And even then, by reducing that heat loss, you're going to be reducing your energy bill. So there's a savings there. And it'll impact your BER. So any type of insulation that you carry out on your home is going to improve the BER rating of your home, which then in turn improves the value of your home. So it's a win-win situation.
So what kind of costs are a homeowner looking at, say for a typical 3-bedroom semi-D?
For attic insulation? Well, with a typical attic space, you're probably looking at now roughly €1,500, but it'll depend on the type of insulation you choose or the depth. We'd always recommend, if you're going with mineral wool, maybe 300 mil is probably the best. And then you need to consider the attic space. Do you use it as a livable space? So if your attic is converted, then you might want to consider doing the attic insulation at rafter level. So you're letting the heat from your first floor go up into your attic, but you're holding it then at the rafter level. But if you're not using it as a livable space, then we'd always say just insulate at floor level, put the insulation between the floor joists, and ventilation then is really, really important in that attic space. You don't want moisture building up there, because over time that's going to have a detrimental effect then on the roof structure.
Okay. Actually, Geraldine is asking there, Susan, attic insulation, where can I find out what the gold standards are and how do I engage a reputable contractor?
Okay, well, it depends and I will talk about the grant process later. If you want to go through the grant route, you'd have to use an SEAI registered contractor, and I'll talk about that later. So we have a list of registered contractors on our website, and just as a government body, we make sure to check tax and insurance and make sure that they have the right qualifications. But the NSAI is also, a good place to go. It'll give you an idea of certified products that you should make sure your contractor is using. And then really it's about getting references, talk to other people that have gotten it done. Even even maybe your energy providers. A lot of our energy providers provide the
Yeah.
service, and then you get additional energy savings through them as well. So that would be a good place to start as well.
Brilliant. So just we've covered attic insulation a little bit, and I'm sure if anyone has any questions, we'll come back to it. But wall insulation.
Mhm.
So internal, external, tell us a little bit about it and what's the difference?
Sure. Well, again, as with attic insulation, I'd say the same thing to bear in mind. If you have uninsulated walls, again, you're losing tons of heat out of those uninsulated walls. So it's costing you money. So the more insulation you do on the home, the more comfort you're going to benefit. And I'm sure you have rooms in your house that you don't use because they're cold and drafty. So by
Sure.
really insulating that house, you're going to really increase the comfort levels. And depending on your wall type, so there's probably three different types of wall insulation you can carry out. So there's the external wall insulation, which is sometimes called the wrap.
Hmm.
That's probably considered the one with the highest insulation factor. But it also can be more costly. So again, you have to consider your budget, wall types, and maybe the level of disruption that you want to undertake in the house. But external wall insulation is where they put the insulation slabs on the outside of the walls, and then they wrap it with a weatherproof render to protect it. You can then have internal wall insulation, sometimes known as dry lining. So again, consider disruption levels. So that's going to go on the inside of your walls, your externally facing walls. So you put plasterboard on, then you have to plaster that. And you just need to consider, like, there's decorating, if you have fitted kitchens or tiled bathrooms, you'd want to be doing those external walls as well, ideally. So you have to consider all of that. And then I suppose the most cost effective one is cavity wall insulation, and that's where they pump the insulation beads into the cavity wall. And then again, it depends if you have the right wall type. So obviously, if you have a solid wall, you can't go for that option. So if you're not sure where to start, it's really good just to engage with a contractor, talk to them. They'll come out, they'll do a survey and tell you what wall type you have, and they'll run through the different options and costs for you.
I'm just thinking of Saoirse's home there. Like obviously, if you have a very old home, that's obviously something you'll have to consider as well in terms of attic,
Absolutely.
in terms of
Yeah.
external wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have stone walls, and a huge amount of that is about the breathability of the walls, then you really do need to consider what you're putting on those. And I know I'm not an expert in that area, but there are a lot of new materials on the market that claim to be breathable. So I would definitely say, if you're looking at that kind of building, a heritage building or a stone building, you do need to get someone that's expert in that area to give you good advice on that.
Brilliant. So external wall insulation, what kind of difference, and it indeed is for attic as well, what kind of difference will it make to the comfort and warmth and also to your BER as well?
Well, I mean, as I said, throughout all this insulation is going to improve the warmth in your home. External wall insulation is probably the best, but that's what they say, it's the best. Best practices, if you have cavity walls, that you'd pump those as well as externally insulating walls. So you are going to really benefit from a warm home, and then you're going to reduce your energy bills. So there's cost savings to be made. And you're doing your bit for the environment as well, because you're reducing your reliance then on heating and reducing your carbon footprint. And all the time, the more insulation you add to your home, the better your BER rating is going to go up. So it really is, we'd always say, start with insulation before you start looking at any of these renewable technologies, because that's really your starting point. And then you start looking at your heating systems, and
Hmm.
then you start looking at renewable technologies.
And I suppose a lot of people will be doing this in conjunction with maybe completely renovating a home as well.
Mhm. Well, that's actually the best way to do it if you can. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
completely gutting a house, it's the best way. And then you're obviously, if you're carrying out a BER, they're going to give you a good, and the new advisory report, which you spoke about last week in your webinar, which was really good. That's going to give you a whole indication of the different types of measures that you can, or upgrades you can carry out, that's going to increase that BER the whole time. So if you start with that, you basically have a plan, and then if you're doing a big energy upgrade, you can do it all in one go. So you might as
Perfect.
well do the whole disruption in one go, rather than, now we do have
Yeah.
grants for individual grants. So if you're not in a position obviously to do it in one go, you can get individual grants for these upgrades.
Brilliant. And so just speaking of grants as well, do you want to
Mhm.
just tell us a little bit about the grants that are out there for people as well? So for grants for attic and wall insulation.
Yeah, so SEAI offer a number of home energy upgrade grants. So we have a number of routes that you can go through. So if you are somebody that just wants to carry out one or two energy upgrades, then we do have fixed value grants. They're not means tested. You can apply online on our website. There's a number of eligibility criteria that you do need to make yourself aware of. So you must have grant approval in place before you start any works. And that's very easy to do because we have an online application wizard on the SEAI website. All you need to have is your MPRN number from your electricity bill. Pop it into the system and it will tell you what grants are available. So as long as nobody has applied for a grant for that same upgrade prior to you for that property, it'll be available for you to apply for. And then you get instant approval once you agree to carry out the terms and conditions of the grant. So they cover attic insulation is €400. There's a range of wall insulation depending on whether you go with internal, external cavity and your house type. And then we have other upgrades as well if you're looking at heating systems and renewable technologies. But I mean, you can get up to €6,000 for external wall insulation. You then have 6 months, 8 months. It's been extended to carry out all the works. And you have to, I spoke about it earlier, you have to use a registered contractor. So that is very important. But we would always say that, SEI doesn't approve work. So just make sure that you do get your references and have a contract in place. It's really just, we need to ensure that they're fully insurance and tax compliant and that they have the right qualifications. So that's why we have a list of registered contractors. And then once you have all the works completed, you carry out a post-works BER assessment. So that's for us to make sure that the grants are having that positive effect on homes and that they're increasing that BER. And then you get a grant of €50 towards that as well. And you send your paperwork into us, and then we send you your money in about 2 weeks. So it's
Yay.
very straightforward. Now, if you do find it a bit daunting, you can work with energy partners, and we have a list on our website, and they'll manage the entire process for you. And then there are other routes. If I have time to just quickly say, we do have
Absolutely, yeah.
free energy upgrades. So for people who are in receipt of certain welfare payments, you would be eligible for 100% energy upgrade. So it is worth just checking on our website to see if you are eligible for that. And then we would carry out similar measures, attic wall insulation, and we will look at heating systems, possibly windows, depending on the circumstances and the type of home it is. And then, as I said, if you want to do a big energy upgrade and you really don't know where to start, we do have project coordinators and one-stop shop providers. So they work on our community programs. And again, they'll just manage that entire process from start to finish. They'll manage the grant application, they'll manage the works, ensure quality, and then, it's an easier process for the homeowner if you're going to do, say, a bigger energy upgrade rather than one or two measures.
Brilliant. Thanks, Susan.
I know that was a bit of a
Saoirse.
whirlwind, but there's a lot of information on the website.
Yes, and I'll share all the links with everyone in an email afterwards as well. Saoirse, so thanks a million for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your very unique Lighthouse Keepers home? How did you first end up coming across it? What are the kind of things that drew you to it?
Okay. Hi everyone. Thanks for asking me on this. It's a topic I'm totally passionate about as well, like buildings and getting them energy efficient and making it a less daunting task for people to buy these old homes. So I first came across the Lighthouse Keeper's house when I was living in London. I saw it on a newspaper article, flew home, viewed it and bid on it, and was lucky enough to win the bid. But my home is a Lighthouse Keeper's house. It's one of 5 that are privately owned in Ireland. There's about 76 of them, most of them owned by Irish Lights. It's about 200 years old, and every lighthouse keeper that watched over the waters in Youghal and their families lived in that house. And part of that being its history means that everyone that lived there, their posts that they were lighthouse keepers maximum 7 years. Nobody ever owned it, so they were investing in either the decor or the energy. So it was, manned and probably manned, not, even though the first lighthouse keepers in Youghal were women.
Wow.
Yeah, the first ever female lighthouse keeper in the world was in Youghal, in Youghal Lighthouse. But yeah, most of them were lighthouse keepers up until 97 when it became automated. So I guess all works done to it were done up until 97, and then I bought the house in 2016. So yeah. there was a lot to be done when I got the keys to the house.
What was the condition like, Saoirse? Was it livable when you moved or when you got the keys?
It was livable. So what had happened is families that worked for Irish Lights were allowed to holiday in it for those 20 years. And there was a man that looked after the gardens and painted it. But it was very damp. Like the survey that I got done before reading it reads like a bedtime, a nightmare, to be honest, And I think that's a great place for, when people get their survey done before they buy, it kind of tells you where to start or where most of your budget is going to go. So for me, there was a lot of rising damp. It's a 2-story house, but the bottom section of the house is under the road, so built into the cliff. So naturally, there's very little sunlight at the back of the house. So there was a lot of damp, and there was an old boiler. The windows hadn't been upgraded in, a lot of years. So yeah, there was a lot of work to be done, and it took about 2 years between, winning the bid on the house and then works beginning. So I think that's something to bear in mind as well. I don't know anybody who's bought a house and has said it was a really quick process. I think buying a house takes a long time anyway. And then when you take into account an older building, you just have to have a little bit of patience, maybe a little bit more patience than you would. And then as well, on top of that, if it's listed, you have to work with conservation officers on how you're going to renovate the building. So that takes a little bit of time. Yeah.
So tell us about the renovation then. So was the renovation took 2 years, or that was 2 years between starting the renovation and getting the keys?
2 years between winning the bid and starting the renovation. So in that time, the deeds were missing, so that took us a while.
Oh gosh.
The Irish built it, the British robbed it, the Irish robbed it back around the turn of the century, so the deeds went missing. So then we found the deeds, and then in that time I was working on planning. So it's a protected structure, but I didn't want to change too much. The character of the building, I wanted to keep that, just wanted to modernise it, maximise the view, make it a bit more open plan, and make it more energy efficient. Like when you walked into that house, your nose would instantly start running. It was so cold. It was colder in the house than outside the house. Like there was wind howling through the windows. So then the renovation itself took 5 months, which was good to have a timeline. It was one of my biggest challenges, and equally probably something I would recommend is having a set timeline, because the thing will get done and you'll be forced to make decisions on things that you might hum and haw over, if you had time. So yeah, the renovation took about 5 months, and the main things that we did were upgrading. So anyone that comes to visit the house, I tell them, like, most of my savings are behind the walls. So although I love interiors and would love to spend all my money on interiors and all those things, most of my budget went into damp proofing the house with a conservation method that you talked about there, Susan. Insulating all the walls, the floors, the ceilings, the attic. And then all my windows were listed as well. So they're all sash windows. So they had to go to a conservation restoration joiner. That's a tongue twister. To get them double glazed and make sure that the house was sealed. Because like Susan said, there's no point investing in an air to water or a heat pump if it's all going to go out your windows, doors, chimneys. So that was task number 1, and the bulk of our work was doing that.
Wow. And so is it a heat pump that you have in there now, Saoirse, or is it? Yeah. Oh, wow. So do you know what the BER of it is, or would it be exempt because it's a
protected structure? Yeah, exactly. And like part of it is, so there's a new conservatory on the building as well. So marrying old and new buildings, that's something, if anyone is taking on an old project, that's a key part of it as well, to make sure the two speak to each other and that the heat system works in both. But so far, like, I got a lot of advice along the way, and I had like a conservation architect, and the heat system is working brilliantly. Like, the building had to be breathable both inside and out. So this damp proof course leaves you have a cavity where the water can evaporate up and go up through the ceiling into the attic. And I've underfloor heating, and it works really well in an old building.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I did not expect it to have a heat pump.
No.
I think that's amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's going to be very encouraging for people who do have older buildings. A lot of the questions that we would get would be that,
they're not suitable.
It's not suitable. Yeah.
By the sea. So one of the things was, would it rust, because it's, the sea air, but I got it, I think, aluminium coated, or I got some coating on it that would mean that it would be okay for, if people are living in areas where there's sea or different things in the air. I'm 3 years in, and so far it's, really good system.
You've never had any issues with it, and the house is warm
No.
all the time?
House is warm all the time, and like, I don't know about you growing up, but like having to boil a kettle to fill a bath, that was like a constant.
Yeah.
So I have enough warm water that if you want to have a bath, you could just switch it on and hop in, and there's plenty hot water. The house is always warm. I think one thing, if you do get a heat pump, is make sure before the electrician and plumbers leave, you know how to reset it.
Yes.
And change it for summer and winter, because it gets really extremely warm, and that's obviously not energy efficient. But get the instructions before they head off.
So I just wanted to know, what was the biggest challenge for you then, Saoirse, just throughout the whole renovation? What was the biggest stumbling block?
I wrote down a couple of challenges, just if they're helpful to people. So access is one thing. So where my house is, on the side of a cliff, down underneath the road, meaning that anything we put in or out had to be craned in. So access is one thing, and then the second piece is removing rubble. So I knocked some walls to make it more open plan. About 100 tons of rubble were taken out. Each of those was craned out over the wall. So everything, you see a house and you just picture a dream. I think thinking about the practicalities, which I probably didn't, is key. So access, there's thick walls, so they're about 1 meter thick. So that means changing anything, knocking walls, or getting Wi-Fi through those walls. Or I did all new electrics in the building, so running wires through them was a challenge. Restoring the windows was also a bit of a challenge, like getting someone that has that craft. I think they're few and far between. They're there, but that was a challenge. And coordination. So I was living in London when the project was underway, so that was having key people that you trust on site. Is a challenge, but it pays off in the long run. Mm-hmm. And then I mentioned already that one of the challenges was the time frame, but that's both good and bad. So while I would say that was a big challenge, it made us sweat a lot of the time, it was also good because we were forced to work to time. And the other two things would be getting a mortgage from overseas.
Okay. Interesting.
Is living abroad, trying to buy at home. There's really only one mortgage product, which is a holiday home mortgage. So I'll save you lots of phone calls to banks and just ask about that. And then the other thing, I guess, is grants. It's great that these webinars are here. The people, anyone dialed in now, is already ahead of where I was when I started. Learning about grants and how to apply for them will really help you too.
Did you actually manage to avail of any grants for the Lighthouse, Saoirse? That's something that,
No.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, I don't know, a lot of grants had been pulled. Or they were available and they weren't available that year. And I think applying retroactively, I don't think you can.
No. Yeah. So it is something you need to kind of think about before starting, is the grants, and what you can get as well. Because I think there are some conservation grants as well that might be of interest to people. It's not our area, but there's definitely things for windows, I think, from conservation grants.
Yeah, there are. So I apply for them every year. And I think that's how you go about it, apply every year and hope one year that you do get them.
Brilliant. So what would be your big piece of advice for everyone? And we'll go over to the questions after this. So if anyone has any questions for Saoirse and Susan, we'll start answering them in a minute. So your biggest piece of advice for people who'd be looking to do something similar, maybe with an older or unusual home?
I suppose one key piece of it is, like, I bought with my heart and maybe not my head. And I think that is a really important, logic needs to be applied to all of these things and research.
Yeah.
But falling in love with a building and everyone will tell you you're mad. If you feel it's right, it's always a gut feeling, go for it. Lots of times along the way I was told I was mad for doing it and buying it and all those things. So you have to stick to it. If you don't believe in it, the project will fall apart. So I think having a dream, sticking to it with buildings and with projects is key. As much of a rack and ruin that you buy, it can be transformed, with the right project plan in place, the right budget. The budget is another thing. So with any building, with any new, old, having a contingency fund. So I think everyone seems to go about 20% over, but they say have a 10 to 15% budget. I would say if you can at all have a 20% additional for things that you don't foresee. Everyone will tell you if you're doing it, do it right. You'll only do it once. So, there's little increments on every single thing that you'll do in your house. So have a little bit of extra in your budget for that. And the other thing is your tradesmen. So I found it really helpful to chat to people who had worked with the tradesmen I chose. So my electrician, people who had used that same heat pump. How did it go? What were their bills like? The insulation, the damp proofing that I used. I talked to people who had done that. So I think that was key. When you're about
absolutely.
Your life savings in these things that you maybe don't know much about, like talking to as many people as you can is really, really important. And Instagram is great for finding others that are doing similar projects to you.
Definitely. We've just joined Instagram, and obviously I'm on it myself, and that's how I found you. But I mean, you just, the projects that are out there, it's just incredible. Like people like you that have done these amazing projects. It's worth, I think, reaching out to people as well and saying, how did you do this, and how did you get this result?
Yeah, and as chaotic as it is, because really when you're doing a project, it's just you in it. Your friends aren't doing it at the same time. Just stick with it. Like I look back at my pictures and I love looking back at them because I do it all again. As chaotic as it is, it's still, just keep going if you're in the middle of it right now.
I think a lot of people are put off renovating like an old home because I think they do think of that, the amount of work that's going to be in it and the challenges that are going to be in front of them. But I think you're kind of living proof that it is worth it if it's something that you want.
It's worth it, and there's so much character in, like, you don't know what you're going to find. Like I found 7 fireplaces in my building. And there's so many things behind the wall. I found signatures. So many people have been reared and born in that house. I don't know, it just has a feeling of, I don't know, lots of character in the building. So yeah, I can only recommend people buying these old homes.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's incredible that you have managed to make it into this energy efficient, beautifully warm, comfortable home.
Yeah.
It's such a credit to you.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Credit to the trade. Yeah. But it was really important. There's no point having a beautifully decorated house that's freezing, that you don't want to go to, that you're wearing 3 jumpers and going to bed at night, and that you can't have a bath or a shower in. There's no point. So I knew that most of my money was going to be spent on insulation and heating. So yeah.
Brilliant. I see Emer there is saying the end result is beautiful, Saoirse. Well done. Yeah. If anyone hasn't seen Saoirse's home, you just go onto her Instagram. It's the Lighthouse Keeps Her, and it is stunning. You also do Airbnb as well. So
I do.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Emer is also asking, what are the running costs of the air to water, Saoirse? Do you have heat recovery ventilation? Do you know? That might be very technical now.
Yeah, I do. So the house runs, I think the heat pump itself per day is about €2 per day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the electricity cost of the house in total is about €5.50 a day.
Okay. So that's really
runs on electricity in my house. the heat pump and everything else. So it's about €5 or €5.50, but the heat pump itself is in and around €2 a day to heat the house and have hot water constantly.
I mean, that's nothing if you think about the big massive bills, or if you have like a gas or an oil boiler. Do you know what I mean? The amount of money you can spend, particularly in winter.
Yeah, it's a big outlay to start. When you're looking at, will I get a heat pump or will I get an oil heating system? And it's a much bigger outlay for the heat pump, but in the long run, it'll save you.
Yeah.
That's the thing, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Jason is asking you as well, Saoirse, do you power your home with renewable energy electricity supply company, or do you just buy your electricity from the cheapest possible? Yeah, that might be something that you're not aware of, but
no, I'm not aware of. I don't know if I'm with the cheapest possible provider, but it is something that I would like to know more about. If you know who I should be going with, it's a renewable energy supplier.
Yeah, so there's lots of websites like bonkers.ie, switchers. I'll send them around in the email as well. But you can go on there, and I think you might know as well, Susan. You can just go on there, and they'll actually tell you which is the most energy friendly company.
Yeah,
yeah, and you can switch really easy as well, and it'll tell you how to save as well. But yeah. Let me see now. What is another question? I think this might be for you, Susan. For a big upgrade, you mentioned a project coordinator from SEAI. Does that cost much? That's from Jean.
So no, it's not really about the cost. We have, if you're considering undertaking a big energy upgrade, you can go through, say, our communities grants. So there's a list of project coordinators on our website. Now, just to bear in mind that a lot of those would be closed for this year. So they're annual grants where the individual grants are open. They're always on. So where the communities grant now is probably closed for this year and will open up towards the end of the year. But it is worth getting in contact with them. And also there's one-stop shops. There's lists of them on our website and they'll guide you through the process. But there isn't a cost involved for that project coordinator. They'll just help you and put you in contact with the contractor and go through what works are required.
Brilliant. And I'll share that link as well in the email that's going to go around to everyone. I think this might be for you as well, Susan. How do I get ventilation in attic? When I had it done with a registered contractor, he never mentioned ventilation.
Yeah, well, it's worth checking to make sure you have ventilation. They may have put in the ventilation, so you can get, now I'm not an expert on the ventilation, but you can get ventilation in your soffit. So you might actually have attic insulation and just aren't aware of it, because it is actually part, it's best practice, a part of the building regs. But if you have any concerns, you can get somebody out to just confirm for you. And if you don't have it, you can now get roof tiles, ventilation roof tiles to address the issue.
Brilliant. Jason is asking, hi girls, would your electricity supply company be the first step when it comes to your home energy upgrade? And what renewable electricity supply company would you recommend to power your home? So for the second part, definitely go to one of the switcher websites. And for the first part, you can go through your electricity supply company, can't you, Susan?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily the first step. Again, I
Mm.
know you covered this last week, but if you don't know where to start and you're not sure what energy upgrades to carry out, probably your first step is to get a BER assessor to come out and carry out an assessment, and then they'll give you a good idea of what upgrades to carry out. But certainly contact your electricity supplier, because a lot of them now will have contractors working with them and will help you go through that home energy journey.
Brilliant. Paula is asking, does it matter what age the house is to get the grants?
It does, and I should have said that. Thank you, Paula. It's one of our main eligibility criteria. So for insulation and, say, heating control grants, the home has to be built before 2006. And then for any of the, say, renewable technologies such as heat pump, solar PV, solar thermal, it's before 2011. Now, the reason for that year of build rule is because any home built from kind of 2006 onwards should have been built to those building regulations and should have adequate insulation. And then similarly, homes built from 2011 onwards should have some element of renewable technology. So the grants are all about, tackling those homes that were built prior to those building regs that don't have that adequate insulation.
Brilliant. Frank is asking, my house has a gable end and 1.5 walls that are solid stone from an old cottage that was renovated. Are those walls suitable for external insulation?
Well, again, and Saoirse, you probably have more experience in this with solid walls in an old cottage. You probably do need to get a bit of expert advice on the type of material. I would certainly get an expert out, because I think breathability is key for those sort of walls. So you want to make sure whatever you use isn't going to compromise that.
Perfect. Yeah, is that something that you've found, Saoirse, with your walls?
Yeah, like we used that. I'd say I wrote down what the system was. Platon 5 is the type of, it was a cavity kind of damp proof course that we did behind the walls. Yeah, and because it was protected, we couldn't insulate the outside of the building. So
yes,
yeah,
okay.
on inside, and then breathable paint was important as well for the outside of the building.
Yeah. I'd say in this case, if it's not listed, you could certainly look into external wall insulation, but just to make sure whatever you use doesn't compromise your wall type. So it would be worth getting somebody out to give you good advice on it.
Yeah. Emer is asking there as well, in the case of a renovation where the old part of the house is 1950s and the new extension is brand new, is it eligible for a grant?
The new extension wouldn't be, because it would be built to existing building regs. So once you do the full part of the old house, and if you're looking for wall insulation, then you would have to just make sure that you meet all the requirements for the grant, and then yes, it would be eligible.
Brilliant. I actually wanted to ask you as well, Saoirse, did you get any solar PV technology on your house, or is that something that you're going to go down the route of?
Maybe I will, but I wasn't able to at the time because of it
Yeah.
being listed, like putting it on the roof for that. I wasn't able to. But
Yeah, I'd imagine it would probably, maybe even just the look of it mightn't be right or something.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was advised to go the heat pump route for now, and
Yeah.
then I have some sheds and things that maybe I can use for solar technology, but right now, no.
And actually, just another person, we always get this as well, just about the heat pump. If I was to get a heat pump, are they noisy to run? Do you hear yours in your house now, Saoirse, or anything? That's something we always get asked.
Never. You need a room, all right. You need a sizable, well, not a sizable room, but you know, you need a room to store. It's kind of the size of a wardrobe, and then your other heat pump is outside, so you need to have that somewhere as well. You might hear the heat pump outside if you were right beside it, but otherwise, I have never ever heard it. No.
Brilliant. Yeah, I suppose you've got super thick walls as well, but I think that just people are worried that they'd be able to hear them maybe at night or that kind of thing. But yeah, it's never. I think anyone who has one doesn't have that problem.
No.
Yeah, I think that's kind of all the questions. If anyone has any questions, I think we have had some questions about solar technology and different things like that, but we will be addressing that in next week's webinar. So I won't answer them today because I know Susan and Saoirse are not experts in solar PV technology. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, Saoirse. It's been so interesting hearing about your fabulous home, and we really appreciate you taking your time out of this very sunny evening to join us. And thanks to you, Susan. As always, you're so helpful and knowledgeable about grants. And thanks to everyone who's joined us. I just see there's another comment before we go. Is there? I just answer that two questions actually before we go. Kevin is just wondering, we're in the process of buying a 1920s house with really thick walls, probably 2 feet thick. Would internal insulation work, and what type would be best?
Again, it's the same
Yeah.
answer. It really depends on the wall type. So 1920s, 2 foot thick, possibly stone solid. You'd need to just check what the wall type is and make sure that you're not compromising the breathability. But there are products on the market now, and definitely there's internal wall insulation that you can get that works with that type of wall. Just make sure you check it out and apply the right product for the wall type.
Perfect. Someone else is saying, if a wall is mouldy, is it advised to take off the plaster before insulation? I'm sure it would be.
Yes, as far as I know, you would need to remove that and maybe try and see what the source is before you go applying more insulation onto the wall, because you could just be trapping
it's
the
like what
mold
Saoirse
again.
was saying. Yeah, just about having a really, really, really damp house. Actually, someone is saying as well, you might know this, Saoirse, for an old house with solid walls and using heat pumps, are radiators or underfloor heating the way to go, or did you go with both?
Both. So downstairs, we dug up the floors. So you started from the floor up, you know, with damp proofing and energy. So we put underfloor heating all downstairs and then rads upstairs because we were keeping the wooden floors upstairs.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah, gorgeous. Anne-Marie is just saying, love your lighthouse, Saoirse, and congratulations on doing such a good job with it. And Geraldine said, thank you so much. Very helpful information given out. Thank you so much, everyone. I will let Saoirse and Susan go and enjoy some sunshine. For next week, we're going to be joined by Tanya and her husband, Noel, from Florence and Henry. So their home has just won the RIAI Home of the Year, I think, this year, and they were also featured on Home of the Year this year as well in 2021. So they're going to be telling us all about building their beautiful home and why they chose to install a heat pump as well. We'll also have SEAI's Brian McIntyre, who will take us through the different options for renewable technologies such as heat pumps and solar PV as well. So if anyone does have any questions about solar PV or heat pumps, do tune in next week. And thanks again, Saoirse and Susan. You've been fantastic guests. And thanks to everyone who's joined us. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.